All right, I believe in starting on time for those of you who were so diligent to be here. So I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, happy lunchtime, whatever it may be. I'm Brenda Morris. I'm with AFDO and I'm the Director of Produce Safety. I'd like to welcome you to our annual AFDO Produce Committee meeting. This meeting is now held virtually. Just to give you a little background, in the past, we always held our meetings at our conference. And we have found, particularly during COVID, this has worked very well virtually because it allows everybody to be able to participate and be part of the committee as you have been throughout the year. So welcome. Thank you for the time that you designated today to participate with us. At the end of this meeting, I'm going to do a little wrap up and give you a little additional information that you might be interested in as a produce committee member. And we want to now go ahead and turn this over to Eric Bungo. He is the chair of our produce committee for AFDO, and he is the produce manager for Virginia. So Eric, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Brenda, and good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to first introduce the other co-chairs with the produce committee. And if you just turn on your camera and your mic, I'll start with Kristen Esch and just tell us a little bit about where you work and anything else you'd like to add.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Esch, and I am with the CIPSAM Produce Safety Network with FDA, and I live in Michigan. And I appreciate everybody being here today and looking forward to our meeting. Thanks, Eric.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. And our next co-chair is Kelly Johnson.
Hey, thanks, Eric. I'm Kelly Johnson. I'm the Produce Safety Manager at the South Carolina Department of Agriculture, and I've been here for a little over 6 years.
Thank you, Kelly. And our third and final co-chair, so there's 4 of us that chair the committee, is Justin McConaughey. And Justin, I believe, is not on the call today. He is in an FDA training course in Florida. So Justin can't be with us, but he works for the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture and their produce program. And he also has some responsibilities with home-based food businesses. So the first thing we're going to do today, before we get started with the 2 speakers, is review the current charges of the Produce Committee and the accomplishments that happened between 2022 and 2023. Our first charge number 1, was to construct a 90-minute committee virtual session to be held in May of 2023. Submit the final agenda no later than April 1st. So that charge has been completed. And again, we have 2 speakers today, and with the intro and the wrap up at the end, we'll meet the 90 minutes. Our recommendation to the AFDO board is to continue this charge for next year and hold this committee meeting again virtually. We have a lot higher attendance and we have a lot more people participate when it's held virtual. So charge 1 is completed, and we're going to carry over this charge for 2023, 2024. Charge number 2 is to appoint an individual to serve as the AFDO representative to the Produce Safety Alliance Executive/Steering Committee and offer assistance as needed. So this has been completed, and myself and Jody Taylor were previously appointed to the Produce Safety Alliance Steering Committee, and they have quarterly calls to discuss kind of what's going on with the Produce Safety Alliance and stuff like that. So a couple notes from their last call that was held in mid-May. Right now, the new quarterly training report, if anybody's interested, is posted online. It was released in April 2023, and it shares all the training numbers and distribution of trainings through March 31st. So again, you can find that on the PSA website. The trainer manual, the PSA trainer manual revision process is complete in both English and Spanish. The English manual will be used at the upcoming May Train the Trainer course. Also, the Produce Safety Alliance has worked with NECAFS, which is the Northeastern Center to Advance Food Safety and Science, to develop a look-back survey, which is also available in Spanish, to help understand the costs and barriers of beginning or expanding food safety practices on farms and packing houses. So right now, that survey is still open. So please share that with the farmers. If you work with farmers in your respective regions, it's open and it will close June 1st. Additionally, Produce Safety Alliance online training courses, the online Produce Safety Grower Training course, which I believe is pretty expensive. It's a little about $300, continues to have high enrollment. The Spanish one is not yet complete, but it should be coming out in the near future. Also, Produce Safety Alliance has done some remote training. The remote training policy was set to expire June 30th of 2023. However, the group made a decision to make the policy permanent. The PSA is in the process of developing a fact sheet with remote training recommendations to accompany the official announcement. And also with the Produce Safety Alliance, right now they're funded on 2 cooperative agreements, one from the USDA, one through the FDA. The USDA one is set to end or renew in September of 2023, and the FDA one in late June of 2024. 2 other things here to mention. The Produce Safety Alliance participated in the Produce Safety Summit in Mexico in April. Betsy Bin presented on the Produce Safety Alliance program, and Davis Blasini and Mariana Villarreal presented on FSMA PSR worker training requirements. They have had great progress, continues with the Mexico trainings, and they've had 9 trainings have been held so far to date. And lastly, the Produce Safety Alliance, the goal right now is to host an in-person steering executive committee sometime in September of 2023, if they can get everybody together and find a common date. So that is the update with Charge 2 and the Produce Safety Alliance. The recommendation to the Board of Directors with AFDO is to continue this charge and carry it over into 2023, 2024. Charge 3 was to work with the LGMA, the Leafy Greens Marketing Association, California and Arizona, to host a webinar on common food safety challenges associated with leafy greens. So for those of you that aren't aware, this has been a carryover charge for about 2 years now, originated when Ernie Julian was president for AFDO. We've worked pretty diligently to try and get this charge up and running, and it's been difficult. So we're making the recommendation to the AFDO Executive Board to cancel this charge. It's just too hard. We can look at it in the future and working with Healthy People 2030. But for this year, I'm going to recommend canceling it for the next coming year. Charge 4 was to hold a webinar that addresses unique ways to work with and engage the Amish community and the plain sect farmer regarding the produce safety rule. So a webinar titled Training the Amish and Other Plain Sect Communities for the Produce Safety Rule was presented by AFDO on October 26th of 2022. The webinar was attended by 126 people. The recording and information is posted on the FDA Produce Safety Newsletter, Food Shield, and AFDO e-News. So we are making the recommendation that charge is complete and to cancel that charge and not carry it over. So if you guys have missed that webinar, again, it's on Food Shield. If you don't have access to Food Shield, I believe it is out on the AFDO website as well. Some really good information on there. Charge 5 was to create a document that highlights environmental sampling, positive results, remediation, and collaboration for industry and state produce programs. So our recommendation here, after talking with the co-chairs, is we worked on this a lot as well this past year. This charge is really just too broad in scope and too hard to manage and break down. So we're going to really need some clarity from some states and FDA on some direction and scope to continue this charge. So for right now, we're going to recommend canceling this charge just until we can narrow down what exactly we want to do with it. As some of you might have experience in retail food and manufactured food, sampling, positive results, remediation is just a very, very large topic, and you can go in any sort of direction. So again, we're going to put that one on hold and cancel it. Charge 6 was to create a document describing how state produce programs can locate contacts for emergencies that cross-reference all appropriate food safety agencies and programs. So the committee worked this year, and we completed a document titled Emergency Planning and Management, Always Be Prepared, and that was distributed in October of 2022. This document was posted to the FDA Produce Safety Newsletter, Food Shield, and AFDO e-News. So that charge is complete. And we're going to recommend canceling this charge moving forward. Charge 7 is to develop a recurring blast quarterly email to all produce associated stakeholders that is mainly focused on a single topic and provides a link to a current resource. So we're going to recommend canceling this charge as well. Right now, FDA has resumed the monthly informational newsletters, and AFDO does have a section in there to include resources, upcoming events, and relevant information that's sent to all the PIs under the Produce Cooperative Agreement. So really, if we would continue this charge, there would be a lot of duplication of efforts. So again, we're happy to integrate with FDA and their program leads on that as well. So those are our accomplishments and our charges, for 2022 to 2023. We are removing charges 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and we're carrying over charges 1 and 2. At the end of the call, Brenda's going to make a request for some new charges that we can work on between 2023 and 2024. So again, she'll be in touch about that. So I want to open up. Does anybody have any questions about any of the charges? Any comments you would like to make? Okay, hearing none, I'm not going to delay. Steve Morris, I see you're on the call. We'll have the final committee report to you before the deadline. It's typed up. We're just waiting on a couple other things, and we'll be done with the final committee report for the produce committee. So next, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kelly Johnson for the rest of the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks, Eric. We're going to move on to the presentation portion of our agenda. I'm excited to introduce our speakers today. We have 2 great topics to go over today. Our first presenter is Jennifer McIntyre. She will be sharing a resource document that was created by the International Fresh Produce Association. And this document was developed to help firms understand key questions that they should ask regulators during an outbreak investigation. So Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks, Brenda. Thanks, Eric, and others for inviting me to address this group today and share some work that I had been involved in when I was with the International Fresh Produce Association. So I am sharing my screen and expect that you all can see it. I'll note that I have given the okay to share the slides and also provided Brenda Morris with a couple of links that are related to the work that I'm going to be talking about here today, so that you will have these resources available to you. So a little bit about me. You'll notice that I am now with Food Safety Strategy. I've opened my own consulting firm within the past month, but prior to that, I was with the International Fresh Produce Association as their Chief Food Safety and Regulatory Officer. So if you're not familiar with IFPA, IFPA is kind of the baby, the net result of PMA, the Produce Marketing Association, and United Fresh Produce Association having come together at this point about 1.5 years ago to form the International Fresh Produce Association, a trade association that represents the entire supply chain for the fresh produce industry. So it's growers, shippers, packers, fresh cut processors, distributors, out to retail, food service, institutions, basically anybody and everybody who has anything to do with the fresh produce sector can be part of the membership. Any commodity, any region, including worldwide, although many of the members are still very US based, but it is a global, a truly international organization. The purpose of the association is to advocate, connect, and guide. And one of the ways that the association does that is through having a number of councils. So kind of similar to AFDO and having committees. IFPA being another association also has committees, call them councils. The Food Safety Council is by far the largest within IFPA, a roster of about 150 or so people. And it's a diverse membership. So if you include the retail and food service sector, you can see that just over half of those 150 people are coming from what I'll call the more traditional industry side. A number of service providers, whether they're laboratories, software providers, all those vendors that support the business of the industry can also be members, and a number of allied associations. So IFPA being kind of that big, broad umbrella also includes some of the smaller regional and commodity specific associations. So I heard LGMA referenced before. They're a member of IFPA, Florida Fruit and Veg, Northwest Horticulture Council, US Apple, you name it. And a number of them are very interested in food safety and want to be part of the discussions within the Food Safety Council. At IFPA, we looked to the councils to do a lot of the work of the association. So as I heard Eric go down the charges, it's not quite as formal of a process as that, but nevertheless, it is within the council committee structure that some of the deliverables, many of the deliverables that you'll find coming out of the association, they come from the councils. And so within the Food Safety Council, there, again, given the diversity, given the number, there's a lot of discussions, but regulatory issues often come up. And not surprisingly, the relationship with regulators can be a little touchy at times, whether you're viewed as the friend or the enemy, kind of depends on the company, their experiences. So a number of the association members have gone through recalls, and many of them have even been involved in outbreak investigations. And so one of the goals related to connecting is to share some of these experiences within the membership to try to reduce the fear factor for those who have not had those regulatory kinds of interactions before. Overall, there is, I want to give the assurance that there is recognition within most of the industry that as regulators, you have a job to do. There is certainly the incentive to cooperate, sometimes maybe a little too much, because they are fearful of the power that you wield, in the ramifications of not being cooperative if you are especially under investigation in a more heated type of situation. When the Food Safety Council was talking about the interactions with regulators, and again, produce being one that does have a number of outbreaks associated with the sector, with the commodities, there was a sense that there was a lot of diversity within the industry members in how they would react, the questions that they would ask, the questions that they would respond to when regulators were asking. And those who had more experience and had more insight into the outbreak investigation process saw an opportunity to work to deliver a resource to the industry. For me, when I was with the association, I would say the number one question that I heard members kind of complain about when it came to interactions with regulators was just getting the very basic answer of, why are you here? Is this a routine inspection? In which case the company doesn't have to be, perhaps so alarmed, or is it for cause? So has there been a complaint? Has there been a positive sample that's been found either by a regulator or elsewhere within the supply chain? Is there an outbreak investigation going on? Which would change the mindset of the firm being visited. And then for those, say, sample assignments, who sent you here? So are you here at the direction, are you with the state? Are you with the federal government? What hat are you wearing? Who sent you here? So just getting some of these fundamentals seem to be a challenge. And so the more, I'd say, industry veterans decided that they would come together within the Food Safety Council as a work group. This was one of the larger work groups that I've seen within the produce industry. Volunteer group had about probably 15 very passionate, very committed members who worked very, very quickly, kind of record time, in putting this list of questions together. And so the link is here, but as I mentioned, Brenda will go ahead and send it out so that you can download these key questions for regulators during outbreak investigations. Again, the audience for this is members of the produce industry, but I hope that it has a side benefit, if you take a look at it, in trying to anticipate the types of questions that you or your colleagues may get in approaching produce industry members. So there are a couple of categories of questions that I will briefly go over. The first being just what is the agency that you're with? Where are you coming from? How do I get in touch with you? What's your contact information? Who else are you working with? And then a lot of questions on what is the issue? What brought you here today? And the document is really framed more with the outbreak investigation in mind. We recognize that hopefully those interactions are few and far between. This document is not intended to cover routine inspections, or even some of the more standard, if you will, for cause interactions, but really is focused when there may be an outbreak and a regulator is visiting to collect some information, recognizing that the point in the process is unknown, and there are a lot of unknowns during these types of investigations. So asking, where are you in the investigation? Is this you're still collecting a lot of information, filtering through stuff, or is the regulator, are the agencies at the point in an investigation where you kind of know that it's me? So getting a sense of that, getting a feel for how an investigation is proceeded in order to help the company, help the regulator, and really provide information that would be meaningful and that would be useful in an investigation. There are a number of questions that are recommended around testing, product samples. So have samples already been collected? If so, are they positive? Where are they at in the queue within the laboratory? When might I hear about results? Are you here to collect samples from me? And what are you going to be testing for? When might I get those results? When will we know more information? Questions on the traceback. And what led you to my firm? Can you show me some of the documentation that may be, especially for those earlier parts of the supply chain for the grower, shipper, processors? Are there specific date ranges? Are there specific purchase order numbers, bills of lading that can help me focus as the industry member, my efforts in getting you information that would be pertinent and not just overwhelming a regulator with a data dump, but really trying to, with a better understanding of the situation, being able to fine tune some of the information so that it is germane. Other questions, if it's an outbreak, is the outbreak over? Or is this an ongoing situation? If it's an ongoing situation, then how can we help try to resolve the situation? Looking and asking for details around illness onset dates, the line list, not just illnesses maybe that are attributed to the firm that's being visited, but more broad, kind of seeing the big picture of what the situation really is. How many other traceback legs are there, or is it me? And do all roads lead to my company, to my farm, to my facility? Are there other suspect products? So what does the epidemiological data look like? Is it a very, very clear what the product of interest is, or is there some uncertainty? Again, where are you at in the investigation? Are there any clues that we can gather from the whole genome sequence of clinical cases? So has this whole genome sequence, has this isolate been seen before? In what regions? In what types of products? Has it been found in my own operation before? Do you have evidence of that? So kind of, again, getting more detail into the fuller view of an investigation. There are also questions that we recommended asking around the communication. So who are the best contacts within the agency? When can we connect again? And most importantly, especially for an ongoing investigation, is a public announcement expected? What is that public announcement going to say? Are you going to name my firm? Would I have an opportunity to view that announcement beforehand, et cetera? So although I've kind of talked a lot, the question sheet, it's a few pages. We had intended on developing a companion document that would explain for each of these questions, why is it important? And how should a firm be thinking about the answer that they receive from regulators? That hasn't happened yet. I'm not sure what the timing would be for that. But it is, you can see it's a number of questions that cover a number of different topics. And we recognize that today, when a single regulator approaches a firm, that they probably don't have, not only do they not have all this information, but in all likelihood, it's different agencies that are working together. It's different people who are working together who have bits and pieces of that information. And the person who's been tasked with visiting the company of interest they themselves may not have a full view into the situation. That there may be different inquiries. Firm may be contacted by a couple of different agencies, by a couple of different people. How can there be better coordination to try to put those puzzle pieces together in a efficient way? And I know I had spent a lot of my time explaining to industry members when they have been the subject of an investigation and they call me and they're like, I don't know why they can't just tell me the lot number. If they would tell me the lot number, I could, tell them everything about the product. And so the lack of understanding still within the industry about what is known and what is not known, there's a bit of education that I think still needs to occur. And obviously, as a situation progresses, more information becomes known. So again, the request would be to clearly communicate in those initial interactions, just where are we at, what do we know and what do we not know, and what are we doing to find out, and how will that information be communicated to you? What I have heard, what I've heard secondhand from industry members, and in some cases, what I've heard myself as in the investigations that I've been more deeply involved with. And the tone, obviously, that I'm conveying here may be a little bit different than the tone that actually is expressed in these interactions. But to hear when a regulator shows up, hey, I'm just following the assignment, I don't know anything more. That's annoying, but it's even more agitating when regulators sort of suggest that they do know more and they just won't tell the company that they're interacting with. I have seen over the past couple of months, several instances where a sample was collected and the company was told, I can't tell you, or I won't tell you what we're actually testing it for. If we're testing it for a certain pathogen, chemical hazard, et cetera. And that is, I'm not sure that that's very useful to try to keep that sort of information from a company that's being investigated. And then, I don't know the details. I was told to collect these records. That's all I know. And there's a recognition that in some cases, in many cases, investigators probably don't have the full information. But the hope is that with time, we can work on that and there can be improvement. Today, I think the low-hanging fruit is when there is information that can be shared, but for whatever reason, it's not shared. There, I think we can make some immediate improvement. The aspiration, and we realize this is probably far in the future, is that when that official shows up, that person will proactively share the answers to all of these questions, that the information will have been coordinated, collated, and communicated to the firm of interest. For now, again, recognize that there are several barriers to that, several reasons why it's just not possible to do that today. But hopefully with some consistency on the part of the industry in asking questions, and with your awareness of the types of questions that companies may be asking, that we can work to build these kind of packages of information to share. So I know that I think we have a good amount of time for questions, and I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts of where you see the major barriers to getting some of these answers, whether that the information doesn't exist, or if there are other barriers that limit your ability to share information with companies today. So I will stop sharing my screen, and I think, Kelly, the idea was that people could use the chat function to ask questions. Is that correct?
Yes. So we have about 15 minutes for questions for Jennifer. If you want to put it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, go ahead and do that, and we can have some questions.
While we're waiting for questions, I'll add that in terms of the process to develop this document and develop the questions, it was initiated and spearheaded by a work group within the IFPA Food Safety Council. But in an early draft, we did send it to AFDO, got some good feedback, sent it to NASDA, sent it to FDA, sent it to CDC. Didn't get quite as much feedback, but did want to, kind of circulate it before publishing it. But it is at the point where it's now freely available on the IFPA website, freshproduce.com. And there's always the opportunity to iterate, to augment, to change things. So comments are always welcome.
Yeah, and so I know you said it's on the website, but is there any other ways y'all been trying to get this out to different firms or farms?
So it is available on the website, and it can be downloaded as a fillable PDF. Again, the hope being that companies would have it handy and would be able to insert the answers to those questions. And so the PDF can be sent out, just as an attachment. Within the association, this was obviously the Food Safety Council of 150 people knew that it was being developed. They were aware that it was finalized. And then we have a food safety community at IFPA, also about 4,000 people within the membership. And so this was shared with that group as well. I really don't think that the questions are very specific to produce. I think that they are more broadly applicable. And so I had shared it with several of my peers in the broader Food and Beverage Association world. So Consumer Brands, American Frozen Food Institute, a number of others, just to let them know that if they saw value and they wanted to use it, they could go right ahead. But we would certainly encourage the broad dissemination and sharing of this document, and allow people to adapt it, modify it to fit their own use.
Kelly, this is Brenda. I will let you know that AFDO did share this with FDA. This was in the AFDO section of the Produce Safety newsletter, so you can always refer back if you're with one of the produce programs, and we will share it again when the email goes out after this. We'll share those links for everyone.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen this before, definitely check it out. And I think it's good for us as regulators just to know what these questions are and be prepared to answer as much as we can. And I think it would be great for a lot of our farms who are kind of lost when these things kind of come up, and after the fact start having more questions and trying to figure out what's going on. So I think this is a great resource. All right, do we have any other questions? Let's see.
So I see Emily commented in the chat that it could be useful beyond just outbreak investigations. Yeah, I think that's certainly true. Many of the questions are kind of with outbreaks in mind, but I think if a sample if a product tests positive, then a number of these questions are still relevant, and it wouldn't be a heavy lift, to quickly adapt this so that it would be, you get word of a positive, and the questions that would kind of follow from that. But I think a point well taken. There's enough similarity here in some of the key questions that the document could be used for more than just the hopefully rare occurrence of an outbreak.
Yep. Okay, any more questions or comments before we move on? Give it one more minute. She said, looks like a great resource, and I will be happy to introduce it to farms. All right. I don't see anything. So thank you again, Jennifer. We really appreciate you being here today and sharing.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time and interest, and look forward to seeing some of you in Norfolk in just a couple of weeks. I see that there's another comment about a lot of this still can't be shared with growers, and I'd love to dive into that a little bit more, perhaps offline, of what are some of the areas where information can't be shared and why can't it be shared, and is there an opportunity to, if there's value in sharing, let's see if we can find ways to break down some of those barriers.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Great point. Yes, thank you, Jennifer. All right, we're going to move on to our next presenter. Our next presenter is Diane Ducharme from FDA. And she'll be sharing about the work that is being done to identify knowledge gaps about the produce safety rule and how those gaps can be addressed through outreach and education. So Diane, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much to everyone preceding for setting the stage, and Jennifer sharing a little bit about outbreaks. That's definitely interesting information, and I think very useful as growers try to understand more about what outbreaks, they can learn from those outbreaks. So we're kind of switching gears a little bit. And we are going to talk now for the next 30 minutes about some data that we have collected. So first I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Diane Ducharme. I'm with FDA and part of the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. And we are over, kind of following what Jennifer said. When you look at FDA, where are you in FDA? We are part of CFSAN, of course, Division of Produce Safety in the Fresh Produce Branch. And then I am part of the Produce Safety Network. So I see a lot of you on the line today, recognize a lot of names. So a shout out to all of you. I kind of work as the lead, the person in charge for this work group, but you can see on this slide that there are many members of our work group that represent our Office of Regulatory Affairs, or ORA. We have many people from the Division of Produce Safety, and you can see DPS there. We have ORA Office of Partnerships. Many of you know Doreen. And then we also have USDA Audrey Draper to bring in some of the gap information. So this is our second year of working within this work group to pull together the data, pull some questions, maybe some answers to those questions from these data. For this time period, it was kind of defined to October of 2020 to September 30th of 2021. So noting that is prime COVID time. So our numbers are not as they have been for kind of our year looking at data, and just kind of put that caveat in the mix. Next slide, please. Thank you, Amy. Amy's helping me out because I couldn't get this presentation to get up and on the slide viewer for you guys. So thanks, Amy. So we'll just quickly talk about the data that we have. We have both domestic and international data that I'll share with you here in just a minute. We'll discuss some of the questions that the work group has actually asked of these data, and then talk about the next steps, which actually include you. Next slide, please. So this is our purpose and goal. It's really to identify the knowledge gaps that exist for the produce safety rule. We really want to identify those knowledge gaps through those data sources that we talked about. We developed the research questions. So, and when I mean research questions, it's actually the questions that we ask of this data. It's not specific to research. And then we actually prioritize those gaps and share that information out. We also look at what kind of material either needs to be developed or what has already been developed that can be shared more broadly to address some of these concerns. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hit you with a couple of charts. So bear with me. I'm going to try to explain each one of them as we go. In this particular chart, it gives you the 10 data sets that we looked at, and it is broken down. You can see the gray bar across the middle. Domestic is on the top and international is on the bottom. These are for the time period, as I mentioned before, from 2020 to 2021, except for the two databases that you can see on the right-hand side that denote different timelines. And that's just how that's how that data is collected. And we have to work with what we have. So looking at we've got 10 data sets that we actually have data from. You can see an asterisk next to under international on-farm readiness reviews. Those asterisks indicate that we do not have data. We did not have any international OFRRs because obviously it was COVID. So we were not traveling and did not have that data. So we had 10 data sets that we were able to analyze. So let's say under domestic, we have the FDA inspectional data, the on-farm readiness reviews, and that's information that we get through NASDA, through Rutgers. So it is their data. We work with RTAN. So if any of the states call in for the regulatory TAN, we have that information. What was the question? Where does it fall under the produce safety rule? We also have the informal regulatory TAN, which speaks to any questions that we as PSN have gotten from stakeholders. Those stakeholders can be growers, can be the regulatory agency, from industry, so you've got that whole mix of audiences. And then the formalized TAN, which is the FSMA TAN, you write in and you get an actual cleared written response. So that's the FSMA TAN. We also use the USDA Good Agricultural Practices audits. So we were able to bring in that data, as well as all of the state CAP data. So that's from all of the 47 states that have cooperative agreements with FDA to actually do the regulations within their states. Looking down at the international, just moving down that column, we also have, again, the FDA inspectional data that's international. As I mentioned, the OFRRs. We have two new data sets that were set up. We have new staff that actually is responsible for a lot of our international efforts now. And so there is emails, email responses, as well as questions that were answered during the webinars. So you can kind of see that whole data sets that we have. We welcome more if anybody has some that they would like to share. And I'll go through the process that we use to kind of define all of this out. But looking again to the right, as we look at the number of records, this is really how many inspectional data records we had. And then if you keep moving to the right, that's the number of comments that could have occurred or did occur from that 61 FDA inspectional data. So you can see those kind of go all the way down. So the total amount, we had over 5,000 records that we looked at. And this analysis was done on the comments. So we had, over 2,800 comments that we were able to analyze during this one time period. Let's see. What else did I want to tell you? I think that's it. Let's go to the next one and show you what it looks like. All right. So this is really our kind of prioritization. This looks at the frequency, so percentage of the produce safety rule provisions. So what we did is we put all those comments, we have a spreadsheet, we put all those comments into subparts, we tease it out as best we can so that we have some granularity, but we don't want to lose the integrity of that subpart. So this is all tied again to those subparts. So at this high level, we have some priorities in knowledge gaps. So I want to talk a little bit. Those data sets are what we use to actually identify these potential gaps in knowledge, as it were. And the gaps in knowledge, we understand and really want to put out there that these gaps in knowledge could be areas of limited compliance, as we would see maybe with inspections. It could be areas of needed improvement that also represent a knowledge gap, right? And then also areas of potential contamination, right? So this is without actual alignment to the produce safety rule. These are areas that are not compliant, as it were, and indicate these areas of knowledge gaps. So if we look on the right-hand side, you can see the most common. So there's 3 totaled columns. And we're going to look at the last one to the right, which is the total column. So you can see at the bottom, there's 2872, which brings our total of the comments that we're looking at. And then it does the frequency here. And so you've got stars next to each of the areas. We've actually prioritized 1, 2, 3. So just to give some idea of how many we're looking at. So if we go across and look at that subpart L is the highest frequency for this year out of our total comments. Subpart C is the second frequent subpart L was 43%. Subpart C, that looks at the qualified personnel qualifications and training, is at 19%. And then we have subpart E, which is the agricultural water, and that's at 11% for our third priority. So that's your total. And then we did do a breakup into our domestic and international because we suspect there might be differences. And in fact, you can see that we do have different priorities from the domestic, with L being represented as the highest for our domestic data sets versus subpart C, which is the personnel qualifications for international. They are all still within the 1, 2, 3 priorities, but just a little bit of a different order. So I think that brings some clarity to some of the data sets that we have. I think, if I remember correctly, I wanted to share with you, I mentioned that this was the second year. So I wanted to give you an idea of how this data compares to last year. So next slide, please. Last year, we did a data dump. That was the first year we pulled all this data together, remembering that we didn't have a lot of these data sets before. So last year, this is kind of the mix up. You see the first column. This is very similar to what you just saw. It's broken up into subparts of the produce safety rule. In the far right-hand column, that's this year's data. And then if you move to the left, that is the last year's data where we did it the first time. And like I said, it was a data dump because it was from 2017 to 2020. So you can see our subpart L remains high We've got a big change in our frequency there, from 29 to 43%. And you could see the 2s and 3s kind of shimmy out there a little bit. I think one thing to note here is that we continue to see records as an issue. Even though it is not in our priorities here, you see it would be the 4th one for this last year. And the way that we've dealt with that is say on each one of these priorities, records would be something you want to continue to have a conversation and discuss and educate about with the growers. So that kind of gives you the overall quickly of kind of the frequency and putting it into some kind of prioritization. So this helps us as we start looking at developing materials, but also we're hoping that it helps our partners as they look at developing resources for their own states, for their grower, different audiences, and the industries. So let's go to the next slide, please. And we wanted just to show you the cross section of the domestic, again, compared from year to year. A little bit more devil in the details that maybe you want to see, but you do see these subpart L remains high for the domestic. Let's go to the next slide. And then a high level of the comparison across the databases year to year for the international data. And you see that we've now moved our international, we've got number 1 as subpart C. So it does make a difference as to what is being done domestically versus internationally. We're seeing that with the differences that are coming across. And that gives us an idea too of it's not all the same, right? It's not, we need to make sure that we're targeting what is needed within those audience groups. So this gives us some hard data to do that, right? It gets us to start looking at the areas that are most either missed or misunderstood. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is snapshots of the additional information that we collect. So as I mentioned, we bring it to subpart, but then under each one of those subparts, we collect any comments, any additional information that would help us target more closely what is being missed. So in this case, we're providing you with the overall frequency, but each one of these have gotten some kind of qualification if we can do that. And this is across all of the data sets. So the 10 data sets that we have, regardless of international or domestic. This is straight summary slides. But I wanted to kind of give you a feel. So if we went in to drill in a little bit more to subpart C for our international audiences, we would start pulling in more of that, these comments of there's inadequacy of the worker hygiene training, the personnel training, records, no records of the employees. So these give you a little bit more targets to what the content should include. And we have this for each of those sections. So I'm going to ask Amy to go ahead and go to the next slide. And I have asked Brenda, this is saved in a PDF and this can be sent out to you. So you will have this information. So don't worry about taking screenshots or anything like that. You will have this information. So we continue through subpart E through K. Next slide, please. And then of course, subpart L, you would expect to have the most comments, which in fact it does. And it's all over the place. We've got, inadequate cleaning and sanitizing. You've got there's a lot of content in subpart L. So you're looking at pest controls, the toilet facilities, hand washing facilities, plumbing. Again, the records, always the records. Thank you, Amy. Next slide, please. And to finish it up, the N and O. Okay. So next slide, please. So I wanted to share with you a few of the questions that we have and ask if we, actually, this is the kind of setting you up. So be prepared. I'm going to ask you some questions at the end of this. So this slide actually shows the questions that we're trying to analyze. And this is within the work group. These are questions that we've said, do we have data? Is there, is the data sets that we have enough to answer these questions? Do we need additional information, or is it just really academic at this point? So let me guide you through some of this. The first question, what's the biggest knowledge gaps affecting growers? I just provided that. We have that data and we've prioritized it into 1, 2, 3. And that's not to say the rest of it's not important, but setting some priorities is, trying to help us narrow down and really get to the heart of some of those big areas. 43% for subpart L is pretty big. So we've answered that. And then we've got we did ask differences between the domestic and international, and we did see that. I shared with you that just a minute ago. Are there differences seen in the data sets as we compare our on-farm versus our off-farm stakeholders' engagements? So that's nice to kind of see, is the method in which we're receiving and giving this information back, does that make a difference? And I'm going to answer that question in just a minute, or share with you the data at least. And then this year we were able to, we've had this question before, but this year we were able to actually answer, are we seeing regional differences? So I'm going to go through these the 3 and 4 here in just a minute. But I did want to highlight the aqua boxes, because the aqua boxes are additional questions we have of the data. And in some cases, we're not able to answer them. These are questions that maybe we want to keep in this loop of presentations for discussion. Maybe it sparks something with one of you, and maybe there's additional data sets that we can bring together, work together, and answer some of these questions. And in some cases, there's just not enough integrity to the data. Specifically, if it's aggregate data and it loses the integrity to answer some of these really kind of more in-depth questions. So I'm not going to read all of those to you, but just highlight a few. One of the questions we had, does the farm size impact the comments? We can't answer that right now. Do the comments, what are the comments that directly impact public health? We tried answering that last time, and that became one of those academic questions, because really we were asking, what does that mean? Is one portion of the produce safety rule more important than other parts of the produce safety rule? And does it impact public health more? And it really those are one of those ones that it depends. Kind of injecting our systems thinking depends on what we're seeing, what conditions are there, and how the farm responds. So some of these we just can't answer straight out, but we would absolutely love to add to these questions. So that's a foreshadowing. Next slide, please. So I want to answer question 3 and 4 with you. This is the question about, does it make a difference of if we have on-farm or off-farm engagement? So this particular slide talks about the off-farm engagement. We were able to pull 5 data sets to look at this information. Only those 5 had those 5, represent the off-farm stake engagement from the 10 data sets that we had. These 5 data sets accounted for 11% of the comments. You could see the numbers behind there. And so we see a shift in the percentage frequencies. If we look at the off-farm, we see that subpart, from where we had it before. We had subpart L being the highest. If we go to look at just these 5 data sets from off-farm engagement, that shifts to subpart A, and then subpart E and subpart C. All right, let's look at the next slide that actually provides us the information of if we have on-farm engagements. So we had 5 data sets there from the on-farm engagement. And you can see the, inspectional data, the gap audit, the state capped audits, and the OFRRs. So we're actually on the farm talking face to face with that farmer. And this accounts for 89% of the data that we looked at from the comments. So that's my caveat right there. You see the imbalance of the data. With that information, this is what we found, is that subpart L remains high. And so it kind of highlights, 2 things. One is that we're not comparing equal data sets as far as the number of comments. So that skews the data, obviously. But it also brings in the question about how we engage with our audiences and how that information is received. So that's really all I can say about that data. We're trying to ask the questions that we can of what we have. Let's go to the next slide. And this answers the question 4 that we had, or as to if there are regional or regionality differences in our knowledge gaps. So again, we were able to look at 5 data sets. Those were the domestic OFRR, the RTAN, informal TAN, the FDA inspectional data domestically. Again, this is for domestics, and then our state cap inspectional data. So those were the data sets that actually represented our domestic information. And then we broke down the information here on this slide into the subparts and then the regions. So you can see if we look down at the bottom, the North Central had 18% of the total questions from the domestic data sets versus our Southern that had 34% of the overall comments from the domestic data sets. And this gives us a little bit of information. It tells us kind of where we're seeing the information across the regions. It also breaks it down into the subparts. But what it doesn't do is look at the information overall in comparison to the farm inventory. So this is based on frequency of questions on the comments that we've gotten, and not the number of farms that region represents. So I just want to have that caveat. It does give us, again, a little bit more information. There's a lot of ways to tease this information out. Okay, so that's our answer to what we can pull out right now. We might dive into this a little bit more when we can pull all that inventory information. That's another level of complication or complexity maybe that I have not gotten into yet. All right, so let's go to the next slide, and that should be our summary slide, at least of our prioritization of our subparts. We now know that subpart L is our highest at 43%. Subpart C is 19. Subpart E is 11. And again, as I mentioned, subpart O records is kind of in the running always. We always see comments on records. We can do a better job of educating our community about what we're expecting from those records. So those are nice little summary slide. You can read the caveats, lots of variations in time period, and I kind of provided you with some of our caveats per looking at the analyses. But let me go to the next slide and I'll kind of tie this up a little bit. So when we have these datas, this is, like I mentioned, the second year of looking at this. We try each year, is there another data stream that we can add? Is somebody else got something out there that we can put into the mix? Are there other questions we need to look at? And these are kind of internal FDA questions. You know, this is all kind of this top box of sharing internally with FDA. That's what we first do. We kind of go in, does this make sense? Or is there more data? Is there other ways we can look at the data? Can this data be used other places other than me just telling you in this presentation that this is the area of knowledge, lack of knowledge, right? Or can we use it other places? You know, it's valuable data. We've done a lot of analysis at the beginning. Maybe it can be used in other places. And then we share it with you guys. So we're hoping that maybe in these conversations, this is helping everybody as we kind of look at this national picture. What can we do to build upon the knowledge, the understanding, and then the further compliance of the produce safety rule? So we lessen the outbreaks, we lessen people getting sick. These are the, you know, kind of, and I know a lot of states, a lot of industries have different data sets. Maybe you have different questions, and that's really where I want to go with this. So let's go, before we go into the questions, sorry, I'm going to share a few of the resources because I would be remiss to not share resources. Let's go to the next slide. In the various areas in this slide set, these are all of the, you know, outstanding areas that people have, associations, organizations have information. I see one that I'm missing right now, IFPA. Sorry about that, Jennifer. But this is what we want to keep adding to because people need to know where that information can be found. Kelly, are you getting on because I'm almost out of time?
No, you still have a few minutes.
Okay, good.
I was just here to help with questions if you need.
Okay. And then other educational material. These are things that were collected through the cooperative agreement. They are on Food Shield too. So that's, you know, one of the areas. Let's go to the next slide. And then we broke it down, those resources down into the subparts. So that might be helpful for you as well. And some of these might be your own state resources. So don't be surprised. This is part of why we're asking you to share it on Food Shield, so it can become more widely used. All right, next slide, please. I think that's further subparts. And let's go to the last or second to last slide. Here we go. Now, I've been foreshadowing these questions. So now it's time, and I've not looked at the chat. So yes, Kelly, I do need help in kind of navigating that. And then these questions here, you know, or, you know, do you have questions of these data that we can put in the hopper? Is there any additional data that we can use? And does this compare with what you're seeing in your states or in your organizations? All of those questions are pertinent. And maybe kind of at the end there is what's available and what's not currently available, because we can kind of work with that too and set our priorities. So I will stop there, Kelly, and I will let you kind of navigate these questions with me.
Okay, so we do have one question in the chat, and I have kind of a question about this too, but have y'all been able to drill down to specific like citations or requirements under each subpart that farms may be having particular trouble understanding?
So thank you, Michelle. Yeah, so Michelle, if you look back on some of the, let's see, Amy, can you go back to slides 10, 9, 10, 11? Well, we can show them the. Yeah. So Michelle, we can actually get it down to some of the other provisions. And I think that's what you're talking about, the specific requirements within a subpart. So if I'm looking at, pardon me, pardon me, subpart A, I can go under that specific provision and look at 112.1, 112.2, that there were some issues of identifying covered and non-covered produce. So I can, yes, I can. Is there information collected on sprouts? No. There might, so let me caveat there. There might be data collected on sprouts. I just don't have it. So that's a good question, Brenda. We can push that back to the processing branch and let's see what we can do with that. Very good question.
So Michelle had another question about subpart L. Like we know there's a lot of information under that one. So was there anything in particular under that one that, you know, that there was more issues with? Because there's so many, I don't know if it's spread out.
That's a good question.
It might be on the next slide.
Yeah, but I didn't put a, yeah, Amy, advance it to the next slide. 2 slides, I think. But she's asking for the quantities. And I don't have the quantities right off the cuff. I would have to go back and look at the subpart L and see if any one of these comments had a higher percentage than others. And if that's of interest, I can share that back, no problem.
I'd like to know.
Yeah, for sure. How does this data compare to the Rutgers data NASDA shares? And many states have to direct their educational needs. So Rutgers data is the Rutgers data that I have is for the OFRRs. Is that what you're asking, Dwayne? Because that's the only Rutgers data I have.
And Dwayne, feel free to unmute if you'd like to clarify that.
Yeah. Is that, yes, but NASDA has several years. So the OFRR data that Rutgers has, Rutgers contracted by NASDA, that's the data I have. It's broken into per year. And so, yes, I do have that. And that is incorporated as one of the data sets in here. And so you're getting a more robust look at data because you've got 10 data sets versus the 1 data set if you're looking just at Rutgers data. I hope that is answering the question. Okay, good. And for all of these things, I can probably provide you the frequency if everybody's interested. Absolutely, no problem there. So that's a takeaway action item for me.
All right, we have another question. Do you think that there may be more barriers than education to comments or questions? For instance, maybe growers understand what is required of them, but there is some other barrier to compliance. Or perhaps there are provisions that don't directly apply to certain types of farms.
Absolutely, Emily. There's more barriers than education. And I kind of caveat that. That's all we can do is look at this data and say, this is what we propose to use, knowing that education might not be the gap. It might be, misunderstanding. It might be not having money. There's a lot of other barriers. for sure. Let's see, or perhaps there are provisions that don't directly apply to certain types of farms. There shouldn't be comments if they're not applied to that farm. So we shouldn't have data that's totaled in those comments. This is the way I would take that. Maybe if I'm misunderstanding your question, please provide some more direction there.
All right, any other questions? All right, are there, oh, this is for the group, are there other data sets that we don't know about that may be useful? Are there other questions you would like to see teased out of this data? Anyone want to comment on that? I have a question. Did y'all use any data from like the grower trainings? Any questions that growers had during grower trainings? No.
Do you capture those, or are you talking grower trainings as in PSA grower trainings, and that PSA might capture those questions?
Well, both, like state ones or the ones that PSA put on.
We don't have any data sets from the states on that. We'd love to have them if the states want to put it in, and we are happy to share, what we have as well. So we don't have any in our data sets. Yeah. It's a good point, Kelly. Love to see some if states want to share.
Some type of evaluation.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. As you know, if you go to if you go to the last slide is my contact information. And you heard Kristen chime in. She is one of your chairs for this committee, but she's also on the committee for the work group. So she's a good contact. Should you want, oh, well, that's Kate's. I guess mine's not there. Oh well, go through Kristen or go through Kate and it'll come to us.
We can provide it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Diane. We appreciate it.
All righty.
All right. So for the next part of the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Brenda to wrap us up.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say again, thanks to Jennifer and Diane for their informative presentations today. This is the kind of information that we want to be able to share with all of our partners and members of the committee. And after today's call, I will be sending out an email to everyone who participated, and I will be including the 2 PowerPoint presentations that you saw today, as well as the links that Jennifer had mentioned earlier. Eric asked me to mention, as he mentioned previously, that we are looking for anyone who may have ideas or suggestions for projects that you feel the Produce Committee should undertake for the upcoming year. If you would just respond back to that email with your ideas, we'd appreciate it. Feel free to talk to other people within your organization and see if they have any great ideas for us. And then I'd like to mention too, if you're on this call today and you're not a committee member, we'd love to have you. One of the things is you don't have to do a lot of work for us. You are usually, though, the first people to hear about what we're doing and where we're at and new news that's out there. So it's a great resource to have for you. If you're a member and someone on your team is not, feel free to share the email that comes out today so that they can also register to be a member. And before we adjourn today, does anybody else have any last minute questions, suggestions, or ideas for the Produce Safety Committee? Okay, well, seeing none, I'm going to give you back a little bit of your time. As always, if you have any questions about the committee, you need assistance, or you just need assistance from AFDO or have questions, feel free to reach out to me at bmorris@afdo.org. We appreciate you being here today. We thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing those of you who will be at the AFDO conference for the produce breakout sessions in Norfolk in June. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda.